All right, let's have a real talk about the Ukraine war, but not in the way Western media wants you to. Every time you turn on the news, you hear the same old comparisons. Ukraine is the new Guatemala 2, Putin is Hitler, and we're all supposed to rally behind the cause of freedom. But let's take a step back. What if the better comparison isn't one, but the Guatemalan Civil War? Now that might sound crazy at first, but hear me out. Both conflicts share a disturbing pattern, one that involves foreign meddling, extremist militias, and a whole lot of people who were supposedly protected ending up dead. And if you really look at history, what's happening in Ukraine follows the same playbook the US has used in Latin America for decades. All right, first, let's talk about the whole freedom fighters narrative. In Guatemala, the US backed military forces and paramilitary death squads, claiming they were protecting democracy from communist rebels. But the truth? These so-called heroes ended up committing genocide against indigenous Mayan communities. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing the same thing with the Azov brigades in Ukraine. Neo-nationalist militias given weapons, funding, and legitimacy, all in the name of freedom. The result? Back then, entire villages were wiped out in Guatemala. Today, ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine are being targeted just the same. But we're not supposed to talk about that, right? Now let's talk about foreign meddling. The Guatemalan Civil War didn't just happen. The US played a direct role in overthrowing a democratically elected government in 1954, setting the stage for decades of conflict. Sound familiar? Because in 2014, the same thing happened in Ukraine. The US and its allies pumped millions into opposition groups, backing a coup that replaced a democratically elected government with one that just so happened to favor NATO. Now, did Ukraine's leaders back then say they wanted to join NATO? Nope. In fact, most Ukrainians voted against that direction. But after the US helped install a pro-Western government, suddenly NATO was back on the table, and that's when things really started falling apart. Here's another connection. Who really benefits from these wars? In Guatemala, US corporations walked away richer than ever, while the country was left in ruins. And today, Ukraine's economy is collapsing while Western defense contractors, big banks, and politicians pushing these policies are cashing in. Just like in Guatemala, the people actually living through this war are the last ones to benefit. But the Western elites, they're getting exactly what they wanted, a long, drawn-out conflict that makes them billions. And this is why the rest of the world isn't buying the WW2 narrative. Outside of NATO countries, almost no one supported US sanctions against Russia. Why? Because they've seen this story before. They know how it ends. If you're a neutral country watching this war unfold, and you know the US has toppled governments in your region before, what are you going to think? You're going to see the US as the provocateur, and you're going to assume it's in your best interest for Russia to win. Because if Russia pushes back against US regime change tactics, that means your country is safer from being the next target. Now here's the real kicker. If you're against mega corporations running the world, then you should be against this war. Period. This is about protecting a corrupt global financial system, not democracy. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If ending this war means helping a Republican like Trump, even if he has bad hair and a worse attitude, is that really worse than prolonging a war that's destroying economies worldwide? Because while we're throwing billions at Ukraine, our own cities are crumbling. Housing prices are out of control and people are struggling to afford basics. Meanwhile, corporations and banks keep getting richer off this war. So before you jump on the bandwagon, think about this. Who really benefits from this war? Because it sure as hell isn't the Ukrainian people, and it's definitely not us. Drop a comment below, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one.